So, it's a new year, and with it, I look towards a brand new series of retrospectives. For those of you who followed this channel in its early days, you would know that I'm a big fan of Sega's Sakura Wars series, or Sakura Taisen for those who prefer the Japanese name. From doing a bunch of videos in the lead up to the series' PS4 revival, to mentioning the game multiple times in other videos, I feel like this is definitely a retrospective series I should dive into. I've always loved this quirky series, despite its extreme inaccessibility in the West. In fact, it's been the lack of accessibility which has kept me from doing this retrospective series earlier. However, the winds seem to be changing on that front. Since the first game finally got translated back in 2019, fan translations of the second and third game have gotten underway, so it now feels prudent that I throw my hat into the ring and get around to looking back on these incredible games. So without further ado, let's go back to where the series all began with 1996 Sakura Wars for the Sega Saturn. Now, just a reminder that this Sakura Wars retrospective was brought to you by my lovely patrons like Cameron Strauss and Echolocation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosanctum video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content, linked in the description below. The first concepts of what would eventually become to be Sakura Wars would come in 1990. Oji Hirori, a video game developer at the small studio Red Company, would be impressed by a stage performance of Shanghai Rhapsody. This had caused him to come up with the idea of a game built around theatre performers. He would sit on this idea for a couple of years before meeting composer Kohei Tanaka, best known at the time for the Dragon Ball opening song. In 1993, impressed with Tanaka's work, Hirori would ask Tanaka to help him score a game around a theatre, and with it, development of the game would finally begin to take shape. While Sakura Wars' development would start in 1993, it wouldn't really be anything like the final game which released. Despite being assisted by a small team at Red Company, the game, which they had tentatively named Sakura, would be stuck as an experimental project, not really moving towards a proper game. Despite not really progressing towards a proper game, the early elements of what would eventually define Sakura Wars would slowly start to take shape, such as the setting being an alternative 1920s steampunk Japan, and the game starring a majority female cast in mech units. It was also around this time that the team, taking inspiration from the Fire Emblem series, would also look to add turn-based strategy elements into the game's combat too. Despite slowly taking shape, Hirori was unable to find a publisher willing to help bring the game to fruition. That was until 1994, when Hirori met then Sega Vice President Sorichiro Irimajiri. Irimajiri was seeking a new video game to help push the soon-to-be-released Sega Saturn. Irijimi would invite Hirori on a holiday to Saipan, where Hirori would pitch the idea much to Imajiri's interest, who would then agree to support the game. And with that, work on Sakura, now Sakura Taisen, would begin with the whole team at Red Company getting involved. As development progressed, the game would begin to take on a very anime-like theming. Popular manga artist Kosuke Fujishima would be brought on to design the characters, using the team's sketches as references. Alongside the anime theme, the team would also take on elements from other popular shows like Kamen Rider and Ultraman when it came to the battle sequences, as well as how the general story unfolded. By 1995, Sakura Wars had blown out into quite an ambitious project and was quickly growing outside of what Red Company could manage. Thus, Sega R&D Division No. 2 would be brought in to assist them in order to have the game finished by 1996. Due to most of the game not being near remotely complete until right before its release date, Sega would struggle to promote the game. Sega would announce the game in a special Sega presentation in 1995, however the game could not probably be shown off until mid-1996, and the game would not release until the 27th of September 1996. While Hirori had expressed interest in getting the game to Western shores, the poor sales of the Sega Saturn there, combined with international issues between Japan and the US branches of Sega, would see Sakura Wars remain a Japanese exclusive. While the Saturn release would remain a Japanese exclusive, a later PC port of the game would see a Chinese version localized for Taiwan, and, I kid you not, a Russian version of the game would also be produced. Thankfully, this Russian version would be later used to generate an English fan translation of the game in 2019, and it's this version I'll be using for this retrospective. The story is set in Tokyo 1923, right at the height of the Taisho era. Here we see the bustling city of Tokyo in full action as people go about their day. Meanwhile, at Ueno Park, we meet a young woman who has just arrived in Tokyo from the countryside. Suddenly, the park comes under attack from a demonic machine. The woman suddenly jumps into action, pulling out a katana and slicing the machine in two. We then jump to the military headquarters where Naval Ensign Ichiro Ogami has been informed that he'll be transferred to the Imperial Combat Troop, a secret combat unit based inside Tokyo. Arriving in Ueno Park himself, Ogami meets the young woman from the opening cutscene, who reveals her name to be Sakura Shinjuji. Sakura reveals that she is also part of the Imperial Combat Troop, and takes Ogami to their base of operations at the Grand Imperial Theatre, located in the Ginza district. At the theatre, Ogami meets several other young ladies in Iris Chateaubriand, Sumari Kanzaki, and Maria Tachibana, who are also part of the troupe. Ogami soon begins to get very confused at the makeup of the group being entirely young women, especially Iris, who is only 9 years old. Hoping to have his concerns alleviated, Ogami meets the troop's leader, former Russo-Japanese War veteran Iki Yaneda. Ogami is surprised to find the legendary commander drunk on sake. Yaneda then tasks Ogami to head to the front entrance and clip tickets for the ladies' performance happening later that night. Ogami, confused as why he's doing such a trivial task in a combat troop, follows these orders and clips tickets for the arriving guests. He then also meets several other staff members who help run the theatre. Once the performance starts and ticket clipping is done, Ogami heads back to Yaneda's office to find out what's going on. At the office, Yaneda reveals to Ogami that he's actually been assigned to the Imperial Combat Troop, spelt Troupe. Realizing that he's being assigned to a mere theatre cast, Ogami becomes depressed, wondering what he did in the military to deserve such a demotion. It's then that he meets Sakura again, who helps cheer him up as the two do an assigned night patrol of the theatre. The next day, Ogami is beginning to settle into his somewhat lame job as a ticket clipper when he spots Sakura and Sumari fighting on stage during a practice. Breaking up the fight, Ogami is at wit's end and storms out of the stage, only to be followed by Sakura, who apologises for her poor behaviour. It's at that moment that the alarm goes off, summoning all the girls down to a secret bunker underneath the theatre, where it is revealed the theatre is indeed a ruse and they are in fact the Imperial Combat Troop. Yaneda apologises for tricking Ogami, but he needed to make sure he was the right leader for the group. He then reveals the mech suits, known as Kobu, which the group used for combat. He then deploys the team in their Kobu to Ueno Park, which has once again come under the attack of demonic machines. At Ueno Park, the group finds the place under attack by machines under the control of 4 black magicians called the Lords of Death. Working as a team, the Imperial Combat Troop successfully eliminate all the machines and save the park. Following their success, the group pose for a victory pose. Following the photo, Ogami, now with a clear vision of his assigned tasks, heads back to the theatre in order to ready the defences of Tokyo from the dark forces which threaten it. And with that, the story continues from there as Ogami manages his role as a theatre hand, while at the same time the captain of an Imperial Combat Troop. Sakura Wars takes place over 10 chapters, spread over 2 discs. Each chapter is made to feel like an episode of an anime, with title cards and even a next time teaser playing at the end of the chapter to hype up the next chapter in the game. As for the gameplay itself, it is split into 2 game modes, Adventure and Battle. For most of the game, you'll be in Adventure mode. In this mode, you'll take the role as Ogami, navigating your way around the Imperial Theatre, as well as Greater Tokyo. Navigation for the most part works by pointing and clicking on the map where you want to go, with Ogami occasionally stopping on the way to a destination if he happens to run into someone or something. At locations, the game will go into a first-person mode, and quite often you'll find yourself face-to-face with one of the other characters. These characters will often immediately engage Ogami in conversation, and this will introduce the player to the live and interactive picture system, or LIPS. At certain points in the conversation, Ogami will be forced to give a response, often to questions being asked of him. These responses can range from 1 to 3 options, and will quite often be on a timer. In the event Ogami does not answer the timer before it runs out, he will either respond generically or give no answer at all. In the case you are talking to one of the 6 main cast members, your choice will be critical, as depending on your response, or lack of response, you either gain or lose affinity with the stated character. This affinity building ends up being the crux of the game's adventure modes, as affinity gain will help boost the character's stats when it comes to the game's combat system. Alongside the dialogue responses, you can sometimes interact with the character using a cursor. This allows you to observe things about the characters, such as their face, outfit, and, yes, their bust. By moving the cursor over their lips, you can also strike up a conversation, which can often lead to other dialogue response moments. You'd also sometimes observe things such as the surrounding environment. One of the most notable environmental things you can engage with are the bromides. These are found at the theatre's shop and consist of photo cards of each of the party members, with Ogami being able to buy 1 per chapter. Bromids aren't the only cards Ogami can get his hands on, as he soon gains a Hanafuda deck, which he can use to play Koi Koi with the other party members. This traditional Japanese card game can be quite fun if you don't get screwed over by the game's RNG. Arguably the star of the game are the game's attractive female cast members. First of these members is Sakura Senguji, who is arguably the poster girl of the whole series. Being from the country, Sakura is kind of a klutz, however that doesn't stop her from being a determined individual with a strong love of the Imperial Combat Troop. The next cast member you meet is Iris Chateaubriand from France, who, being a child, is quite energetic and can often be a handful to manage. This in part comes from Iris's great desire to be seen as a woman, despite very much acting like a child. The third party member you meet is Sumari Kanzaki, a talented actress who comes across as quite arrogant due to her privileged upbringing. This arrogance often results in Sumari clashing with the other cast members. The fourth member is Maria Tachibana, a veteran of the Russian Revolution. She is haunted by the horrors which she witnessed in her home country, and as a result she comes across very cold and often doesn't take kindly to other members' antics. The fifth party member you meet is Karan Lee, an avid inventor from China. Karan is always excited to play with machines, which can sometimes blow up in her face, but is in general a down-to-earth and fun individual to be around, even if she is a bit quirky. Finally, the sixth and last party member is Kana Krishima, a martial artist from Okinawa. While at first glance, Kana might come across as a fitness freak with an obsession for giant food servings, she's in some respects the rock of the group, being a solid support for the other party members who are having a hard time. Throughout each of the chapters, the 6 main party members will each take turns in the spotlight of the plot, such that you get a pretty much even amount of time with each of the characters to build affinity, until eventually getting into a battle at the end of the chapter, which, speaking about that, during the game, Tokyo finds itself under attack by the Hive of Darkness. This evil organisation is out to destroy the capital of Tokyo and re-establish the Tokugawa shogunate. Thus, your group will be engaged in multiple battles around Tokyo in order to stop the Hive's evil goals. Battles normally take place at the end of the chapter and will see the troupe deploy in their Kobu battlesuits to a series of iconic Tokyo landmarks, from Ueno Park to Asatsuka. Once battle starts, SRPG players will feel quite at home, as Sakura Wars plays very similar to other SRPGs like Fire Emblem and Disgaea. Like in those games, combat will be turn-based, with each unit being given a number in order, with all playable characters acting first, followed by all enemy units. Goals mostly consist of beating the boss at the end of the stage, but occasionally other goals are sometimes given, such as players holding out or reaching a certain point on the map. When it is one of your character's turns, you have the ability to choose to engage in 2 out of 3 actions. Move lets you reposition your character, attack lets you perform either regular, special or combo attacks, and defense lets your character either defend, heal or rest to charge their special gauge. As I mentioned earlier, on your turn you can either perform a regular attack at no cost, or a special attack at the cost of your special gauge. These powerful attacks can often hit multiple targets. Alongside special attacks, you can also perform combo attacks. These can be performed by Ogami and a female unit who currently has high affinity with Ogami when the two are next to each other. This can be annoying to pull off, but they are the most powerful attacks in the game. Once you've used a special or combo attack, your special gauge will be reset to 0. To recharge the gauge, you'll either need to get hit by enemies or use the rest command of the defense menu. Also, on the defense menu are the options to defend, which reduces damage taken by enemies for that turn, and heal, which restores either you or a neighbouring unit's health for around 50 HP. It should be noted that characters can only use the heal command twice per battle. Going over to the characters specifically, each kind of Kobu is customised to their own playstyle. Ogami uses a set of twin swords that allows him to hit enemies twice. His special brings out a powerful lightning attack on a single enemy. Sakura uses a single sword but has a powerful special attack which sends a powerful shockwave down a single line of combat, hitting all the enemies on it. Sumari uses a spear which can hit 2 squares in front of her. Her special delivers a giant fire blast at all enemies within 3 squares. Maria uses a gun, allowing her to hit targets at range. Her special delivers a powerful range attack which hits both the targeted enemy as well as any enemy next to it. Karan meanwhile uses a mortar to hit up to 5 enemies at range. Meanwhile, her special summons a bunch of bots to deliver a powerful blow at close range. Kana can only attack at close range, but makes up for it by being the most mobile unit in the team, and the hardest hitting with powerful attacks and even more powerful special attacks. Iris meanwhile can't move far, but has the advantage of teleporting through any obstacle. Her attacks might be a tad weak, but she can attack all the enemies around her. Also, her special fully heals any unit around her. As I mentioned in the Origins section, Kohei Tanaka would be brought to compose the music to Sakura Wars. Being involved with the project from the earliest inspirations, Tanaka was able to really craft a score fitting of the game's setting of 1920s Tokyo, with a blend of both Western and Eastern music styles. Overall, while the soundtrack can be a bit limiting with only a handful of tracks being used across the whole game, it is a really solid soundtrack with pieces like Move Out Imperial Combat Troop being arguably my highlight theme, and not because it's another piece I got introduced to in Project Cross Zone. However, a discussion of Sakura Wars' music has to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the game's opening song, Genki Teikoku Kagenki-dan, or Attack Imperial Combat Troop. What can I say, this song is arguably more famous than the series itself, and it really only takes one round of listening to the chorus to see why. As for the animation which accompanies this opening, it's pretty solid too. While I'm not the biggest fan of how it randomly jumps into early 3D CGI animation, nor the repetitive shots of the girls panning past the camera, the rest of the opening is fantastic and it really helps you to get into this playable anime. As for the song's lyrics, they were written by Hirori after having a bit of pressure put on him from Tanaka. As for the singer, we have Sakura's own voice actor, Chisa Yokoyama, singing the song alongside the other cast members supplying the chorus. This did actually start a trend in the series which all the voice actors would double up as singers performing all the vocal tracks in the game. In fact, all the main voice actors would then later go on to perform actual stage plays as the characters they voice in the games, which I believe is still happening to this day. Even today, almost 30 years since the original release, Sakura Wars is still such a unique game that we really haven't seen much here in the West. While companies like BioWare have made choice-based dialogue a common recognisable thing in RPGs, the way Sakura Wars does it with that classic over-the-top anime aesthetic keeps it unique from your typical BioWare RPG. I think a lot of fans of anime are really keen on putting themselves into their own anime adventure, and I feel like Sakura Wars is the game which arguably does this the best, more so than your other anime-themed JRPGs like Tales or Xenoblade. I also love the unique aesthetics of Sakura Wars' world, as the Taisho era is such a forgotten era in Japanese history, lacking the samurai and ninjas of feudal Japan, nor the crazy technology and media of modern Japan. While the Taisho era is being more appreciated in shows like Demon Slayer, I still love the bright view of Tokyo and the fun ways they utilise the steampunk in a very Japanese-centric way. However, it's not to say that Sakura Wars is a perfect game. While I love its unique concept, it's clear that the team is still finding their footing here. The story isn't exactly the most gripping narrative, and the villains are quite the letdown, lacking any sort of interesting personality which would have made them entertaining when on screen. Conflicts can also just randomly arise in the cast to be resolved almost as quickly, with the dialogue not exactly feeling natural in places. However, arguably my biggest issue with the game is the battle sections. While I love my grid-based SRPGs, Sakura Wars definitely lacks the fluid movement of games like Fire Emblem. It also doesn't have the best map design, with you often being forced to take a singular windy path through a map in order to reach the boss, which can often result in multiple wasted turns repositioning your units. However, to sum up my complaints with this game, it's pretty much just learning pains, and altogether Sakura Wars is an incredible start to the series. So let's dive deep into the series as I come back next time as we look at 1998's Sakura Wars 2, Thou Shall Not Die.